Hi, I'm Len Edgerly, and welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. This is episode 725 on Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I'm recording tonight in Sanibel, Florida. My guest for this episode is Doug Fleener. That's Fleener. And I met Doug through a recovery fellowship that we are both a part of. And that's where I learned about a book that he wrote and published in 2023. I tracked it down and I read it. And the title of the book is The Day Makes the Year, in parentheses, makes a life, close parentheses, transform your work and life with one day success. It was a book which stayed with me well after I read it a month or two ago, and so much so that I found myself saying, gosh, you know, that book, it had some ideas that I put into practice, and they really were helping me to enjoy my life more and be a nicer person. So I reached out and asked Doug if he'd join me for a Zoom conversation, and that's what we did this morning. We connected by Zoom. He was at his home in Massachusetts, and I was here in Sanibel. And I had a lot of questions, and you'll hear I came up with an idea to use one of my AI friends, Grok, to help navigate through some of the ideas, the practices that he talks about in his book. The book is built around six principles, which you'll hear him talk about. And I just want to list all six of them because we kind of jumped around a little bit. The first principle is the day, and that's the foundational principle. One quote he has is, the true, most crucial time frame for achieving success is the day, one day. Second principle, taking responsibility. He calls that the superpower for success. 3, intentional actions create intentional results, and that has to do with prioritizing things. Fourth principle is practice relentless simplicity. One or two things matter most in most situations. 5, improve 3 things daily. That's, I was trying that for a while. I'd say, I'd like to learn how to edit in Logic Pro a little better than I know how. And so that would be one of the 3 things that I was improving on a day-to-day basis. And then the last one is give to get. And that's a pretty deep one. That resonates with some of the spiritual practices that I've been involved in over the years and am now currently as well. So with that, I'll introduce you to Doug Fleener. How did this book come about? You wrote it, published it in 2023. It's The Day Makes the Year, Makes a Life, Transform Your Work and Life with One Day Success. Why did you write it? How did this come about to enter the world and touch at least one reader, me, in a way that I was very appreciative of?
Well, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, so I wrote a book years ago. I used to focus a lot on retail and customer experience, and there was many years between the book, and I had a couple career things happen. I did speaking and consulting, traveled the world for many years, and then I had a client right before the pandemic ask me to go to work to run his company. And so then that was perfect timing because what I was doing before really slowed down during the pandemic, and interest rates went down and so the business skyrocketed. So coming out of that, I really wanted to look at it a little bit different that just says what helped me be extremely successful for most of my life. And then also in the last few years coming out of the pandemic, what I had learned. And out of that came this book. And, the foundation is that, you live really a day at a time, but it's what you do each day that makes a year, and it's what you do each year that makes a life. And so really trying to put together my blueprint for living, if you will, into something that I could share with others.
It sounds like it was a valuable experience to look back on the success that you had, and the pandemic was sort of a natural pause to reflect. At that moment, were you hoping to help other people, or were you just trying to understand kind of your own life and what had been working in your life and maybe what hadn't been working to distill it for your own purposes?
Yeah, I think that I've since I was in my late 20s, and the book opens up with a story that kind of talks about a refining point in my life. And so I've really spent most of my adult life kind of working and helping others, whether it was running. I used to be director of retail for Bose Corporation. So I ran a large, over 1,000 people division. Um, I managed people through the years, and then I did, and I still do a lot of coaching. So I've worked with a lot of different people, but a lot of it was kind of really focused in particular areas. And I wanted to really kind of take all that and bring it together in a general way, that could help others. And the book is written as such that you can take all these different lessons and just apply them. I think for most of us, when we read a book, we come out of it going, okay, that was good, but what do I do? And one of the tenements of this book is that it's not what you think; it's what you do and act on that really makes the difference in your life.
Yeah. The one day at a time, of course, is something that's a foundational truth of recovery programs, and it was that kind of the starting point. In some ways, you wrote a book about that slogan from for the 12-step programs, or was that sort of an organizing principle in choosing the title that emerged as you were just looking at what had led to your success?
Yeah, I'm very open in the book that this came out of recovery. I sort of led one kind of life until I was 28 years old, and then my life completely hit a rock bottom, and uh, and so really the foundation of my life has been some of the key takeaways in recovery. Uh, but the book is not about recovery, definitely not. But it takes many of those elements, and and I think the other thing is how did I apply early on? Because again, I hit this kind of rock bottom emotionally, spiritually, and financially. I lost a business. I could have lost a whole family over my bottom. And so, how did I apply those as I rebuilt my life and end up, running 1,000-person organization? I probably didn't know it at the time that I was using these elements of recovery, and I think that's what this book really helped me do.
Hmm.
And just one point is, I knew coming out of this last gig as a CEO, I wanted to write a next book, but I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. So I actually hired a gentleman to help me really flush it out.
Hmm.
And uh, and he had worked with some very successful and famous authors, and uh, and I was kind of throwing out all these ideas, and he's the one who came back on, no, this is your story, man. This is your lesson. This is what you have to share.
And he's the
And
one that came up
he
with the
worked.
idea of focusing on the day, the day success.
Yeah, I think one of the things he saw was I kept coming back to all these elements, and
Huh.
he's like, no, 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 it's not what you're trying to do. It's these elements.
Uh, well, and the book is nicely organized. You've got six principles that give kind of some organization, and then underneath each of the six principles, there's eight or nine practices that help someone to build those into it. Uh, can you say more about the structure of it? When you think of the writing of the book and now that it's out there, how you've seen people use it, or maybe you use it yourself, what did you have in mind when you picked the six principles and the various practices that you organized that way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I almost a book I'd written before, again directed to retail, was all about just these retail lessons. And so one of the things that I started to do with this book was start to kind of take all these lessons and all these actions and techniques for living and put them in categories. And out of that kind of became, yeah. I mean, priority number three, I mean, excuse me, number three is intentional actions create intentional results. Back when I was living that, I wouldn't have told you that's what it is. Right. but all the things that are the practices in that element, those are what I had kind of worked and lived by.
Hmm.
So it was interesting coming into it because I wouldn't have said. I mean, the only one I probably definitely would have said is live a day at a time. But I think I learned to expand that about how the days, each day made the year, and how the year makes a life. And so that's why. So out of that, and that's why the thing I find is that like most of us, we remember the stories that people tell us, the little nuggets. Those are the things that will change, give me those aha moments, or turn them into actions, versus something with the six practices, the six elements.
Yeah, and there's plenty of stories in each of the practices. Well, I had this idea. I've never done this before, but this is kind of an experiment using some AI tools, and I appreciate you being willing to play my D-Day bingo game here. But I want to jump in here and explain what D-Day bingo is. And what the situation is that Doug organized his book into 6 principles, and under each principle there are a number of practices. And so the total number of practices was 51. And when I was communicating with him before the interview, he said, a few of these aren't so great to talk about. So he asked me to not choose about 5 or 6 of those numbers. And so I told Grok what the numbers were that we were going to avoid, and asked for a random number as a way to select which of the practices we were going to talk about. Here's what happened. Hey, Grok, I'm ready for a random number between 1 and 51, and not the numbers that we said wouldn't be on the list. I've got Doug with me now. So fire away. What number are we going to discuss?
Hey there. Good to hear Dex with you. All right, let's pick a number. How about 42? It's not on our off-limits list, so we're golden. What do you and Doug think about 42?
Wait a minute. It is on the off-limits list, so try again.
Whoops, my bad. You're right. 42 is off-limits. Let's go with 19 instead. That one's clear.
That's funny. We had a little hallucination there.
This is why one has to be just a little careful working with AI.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad we're not flying a plane or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so what she chose falls under the 3rd principle: intentional actions create intentional results. That's the one you mentioned. And 19 on my list of 51 it's B under in your organizing. Procrastination, or why it took me a long time to write this chapter. And I'm going to just pull up that chapter on my Kindle Scribe here. So you talk about perfectionism, procrastination, task aversion, lack of motive, different kinds of procrastination. I like that there's different. It's not all just one category, which I probably would have thought. But what did you learn about procrastination that led to the writing of this particular passage?
Well, first, may I say is that, when you write a book, some things you are writing for, most of the time you're writing for your readers, but there's every now and then something that you just like to, put in a little Easter egg for yourself. And if I may say that this is my favorite chapter title of all, this just kind of cracked me up. I think one of the issues with procrastination, right, is just, at the basis of all procrastination is some form of fear, if you will. And most of us don't like to use that word fear, but there's something, right, that's holding us back. There was times after I wrote my first book, I wanted to write this second book, and I did over and over and over, put it off. And so this was kind of a good chapter again to, why have I done that? And look, most of the best lessons we taught are something that we learned ourselves, that we had to break through. And I think for most people, it's one, it's perfectionism, and 2, it's just not getting started. Years and years ago, before we had to-do lists electronically and everything else, when I was at Bose, I took a class on using the old day timer, with the daily pages. And but one of the lessons in there was that instead of having a to-do list and then going back and look at it, that each day you had to copy your to-do list to the next day. And eventually what I learned is I'd rather get the damn thing done than write it again.
Right.
So that was a big lesson a long time ago. But I think most of the things is that what's keeping me is this fear again. I think in perfectionism is kind of the big one, or a decision, making a decision. But most of these things is, I hate to kind of quote the obvious, but the Nike just do it. I think
Yeah.
anytime you have a procrastination, I think you have to get started. And the very last thing is, I was just actually talking to my wife earlier. I have this analogy that thinking about doing laundry is actually worse than doing laundry, or replace it with whatever you want. But right, every time I walk past that laundry pile, it kind of yells at me, "Hey, you need to do me." Right? No, you just want to look away. And so I think the same with anything you're procrastinating. Just start, and you'll find it. 99 have 100 times. It's a lot easier than you think.
That makes so much sense. One thing I've learned or at least thought about when it comes to procrastination is that sometimes when I'm procrastinating, it's as if something inside me, maybe my instinct, is saying, not yet, not yet. And that if I'm a little gentle, if I'm not on a deadline or something where I really have the time to say, well, I could work on it today, but I just don't feel it, so maybe try. And sometimes there's almost a divinely inspired procrastination. I think of it as a ripening, that if I've got something I want to do and I can feel the shape of it and I'm moving toward it, that if I wait, sometimes I have the feeling of, wow, I'm glad I didn't start it last week because I didn't know then what I know now. But is that part of your experience as well, that there's sometimes when you wait to do something, it's not just kind of a bad thing, procrastination's got kind of a bad name, but it's simply figuring out the right time to do something?
Yeah, yes, and definitely. And I think one of the things that kind of this new next area of work I'm looking at is really about living in your priorities. And so a lot of times, we're not necessarily putting out there. We're really not working on the things that really matter. Sometimes we're working on the things we want to do or what have you. And so, yeah, definitely delay can be healthy. But I think the one thing is I like to kind of think that a lot of times the voices in our head, sometimes it's us, and then sometimes, right, it's those other voices that we heard from childhood or what have you, and a lot of times you got to come back to what's my reason for delay? Is it a healthy reason, and is it my voice versus I think one of the fears, and again, I'll go to procrastination. A lot of times we're fearful of just doing something either wrong, or maybe this voice in the past has told us that that's not what we do or what have you.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of your listeners here, I would have been the last guy you probably would have ever expected to write a couple books. And so, because kind of just how I grew up and what have you, I grew up in a family, we were supposed to work at Firestone or Caterpillar or something like that. And so in that regards, I have to be cautious that the voices are the right voices and are being supportive, not taking me away from what my heart wants to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's see if Grok.
Let's see what she says next.
Yeah, see if she can overcome her. Okay, let's have another random number. Hopefully not one of the ones that we said we weren't going to call. What have you got for us?
All right, here's a fresh one for you. How about 42? Nice and random, and I don't think it's on our no-call list.
No, that's the second time you've called a number that is on the no-call list here. So
this is make my day, just so you know. And I use AI every day. So,
so try again.
Oops, my bad. Let's go with 17 this time.
17 is in the take responsibility principles. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then it's the last of the practices, final considerations on taking responsibility. So let me switch to that.
Each one of the principles has a last practice, which is kind of a catch-all of small things that I think were really important to share.
Oh.
But didn't necessarily, weren't.
Oh, I see.
Chapter on.
Oh, cool. All right. So you've got as subheadings: avoiding right and wrong, saying you're sorry, right motives, avoid making it about the person feeling sorry for yourself. So yeah, any of those resonate with you the most that you'd like to has an example of what's involved with the principle of taking responsibility?
So one of the big things in this principle is you can't change what you don't own. So you have to take responsibility. And I see, and I've experienced a lot of people I coach, victimhood, or something that the world's out to get them, or big government has affected them, or business, you name it. And the problem is the moment you blame someone else, you can't change it. So you have to own it. And so in this first one, avoiding right and wrong, is a lot of people will go to great lengths to not be wrong. And so the issue, though, is if you want a solution, if you want to move forward, whether it's at home and what have you, is don't let right and wrong get in the way. Just what is the best solution or answer or decision or what have you that we want to do.
Well, this one happens to have really, it's perhaps the most lasting gift of the book, because I remember when I read it, there was one of these domestic little conflicts was brewing. And my wife and I have been married 40 years, so we've got a whole repertoire of these things. But the one that was really driving me crazy, and I think it's her, but it might be her sister. We live with her sister in the winter. And I'd walk by a drawer in the kitchen or the bedroom or the bathroom, and somebody would have left the drawer open. And, and my wife sometimes will be on me for stuff. How come you just leave the dishes in the sink, you don't wash them, and this and that. So we each have our little things that we think we're right and wrong about. But I was just about to try in a kind and practicing the principles way over coffee, say, do you think you could close the drawers when you open them? Because it really kind of bugs me. And after reading this chapter, I think, wait a minute. If my goal is to have the drawers closed because I prefer it that way, why don't I, whenever I walk by an open drawer, I just close it? And I don't try to make her close it by shaming her and say, whatever. It's been probably a month, and I haven't ever talked to her about it. And the drawers... now it's becoming like a game and a pleasure for me. If I see a drawer that's open, I just calmly walk up to it and I close it. And I feel agency. I feel like I've done something to shift things off the list of things to get sort of scrappy about with my wife. That's good. And I am the master of the drawers in the house. But it was surprising how much I had to fight through to have that simple. And I think when you say who's right and who's wrong, that was probably the door I had to open to say, it doesn't matter. For some reason, it's not that important to her.
Right.
It is to me. So who gets to be responsible here?
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a great example. And the thing I've learned is that in all those sort of, those pet peeves, a lot of they may call them, right? It's just, you have to really decide, is that a hill you want to die on, right? And
right.
To your point it's faster to actually just close the drawer than talk to her and everything else that goes on with it. So I love that example. And the other one in there, let me just also say, is the saying you're sorry. When this is a story I tell that it's in the book, is when I was newly married, I had said to my wife had said something. I'd said about a problem, and she goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I said, "No, it's not your fault." And she goes, "Well, of course it's not my fault. I'm just saying I'm sorry." And I was like, in my family, you didn't say you were sorry because you were admitting you were wrong.
Oh.
Right? And so sorry just means, right, is that there's a regret that something happened.
And you can say that without believing you're the reason it happened, that you're to blame for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, in this one, when she said, "Oh, I'm sorry," she had nothing to do with it. I said, "Oh, well, it's not your fault or something."
Uh-huh.
She goes, "Oh, no, I know. I'm just saying that I'm sorry you're going through that." So I think when you take away the right and the wrong out of a sorry, It's a way, right? And so this is right. It's about remember that this principle is about taking responsibility, right? You're owning your own thing, and you also can share either a regret or a feeling for some empathy that someone is going through it. And you'll be surprised, and I encourage all your listeners is when you say that, people will say, well, it's not your fault. And it's like, oh, well, I know. I just wanted to share with you how I feel, that I'm sorry you're going through it. I think I'm sorry is the fastest way to get past something that doesn't really matter. We spend so much time in our life of dealing with small things and conversations and arguments that doesn't matter. And every minute you spend on something that doesn't matter is taking you away from the priorities that do matter.
Well, and that makes sense in the context of the day. I think that when I first read the book and I said, I'm going to try this, I was doing a kind of a mental experiment of saying, what if this was the last day of my life? That all I have to live is this day. And I found that to be a helpful kind of mindset shift. I think it helps explain the importance of what you just said. If this really was the last day of my life, would I spend it fighting about whether she had closed a drawer? Or, I can give you a list of 5 other things that in an ordinary day I'm tempted to waste time on. But is that sort of an aspect of the power of the one day philosophy? Is it naturally focuses you on what matters?
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. And there's no doubt as we get older, you think a little bit more about if this was my last day. But I think it's actually a good way to live your life. And not that you want to be irresponsible and what have you, but, at the end of the day, was it a good day? And can you go to sleep at night? And if it was the last day, I have some people see it. I have this strange routine that I always end my night before I go to sleep listening to some music. Because, honest to God, if I died in my sleep, I'd be bummed that I watched, some old Jerry Springer rerun or something.
Right.
And so I do think that there's this element to just what's really important. And we just really learning to let things go. But the only way to let things go is take responsibility for your feelings and not project it on the other person.
Well, now, when you listen to the music, is that to calm your mind for sleep, or how does that fit into what we're talking about?
No, it literally. So my wife goes to sleep a little earlier than I do, so I'm in bed, and so I'm watching on either an iPad or a laptop, and I'll watch some TV and what have you. But in the last half hour, I usually switch over to YouTube, and I just watch some videos, of some concerts or some music, and it literally is. Other than if it would be my last night, I would want it that I enjoyed my last few minutes of
the last things you heard in the world were
sounds kind
beautiful.
of morbid. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's shift to the mornings, because I know that part of the method here is practices, habits, things you do. And I think one of them was that you journal regularly. And I've been journaling ever since I was a teenager. I've got shelves full of my journals. And it's changed for me over the years. At a certain time in my life, I'm just writing about girlfriends or whatever. And sometimes I'm writing in a very free way to just sort of get in touch with my intuition. Or other times I'm more like a journalist. I'm saying, this is what happened today. And if you happen to be reading this 5 years from now, you're going to get to feel it, what this day was for. But how would you describe your current journaling practice? What you hope happens when you journal in the morning, and maybe how it's changed over the years?
Yeah, I think for a number of years, my journaling has been the same, and it's a little bit different for most people. I journal about what I want the day to be and who I want to be. And so when I go into it with, intentions, right? So again, number 3, intentional actions create intentional results. When I go into the day saying, this is who I want to be, right? So I want to be a good father. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good employee of my own company, right? And so if I think about and journal about what I want to be, I have a much better chance at the end of the day that I've been that. And so sometimes, I might, yeah, look, you wake up in the morning and there's something gnawing on you from yesterday, and I'll journal about that, so it doesn't become a resentment, or maybe it's already become some kind of resentment.
Yeah.
That I'm able to just get that out of the way of what I want my priorities to be and who I want to be. And that's how I use journaling, which is a little different than a lot of people. And also, I think gratitude is such an important part of good living, and so improving ourselves. And so those are little things that I'll write about. That so when I start that day, I can remember what's really important.
Right. I want to make sure we get to talk about the sixth principle, give to get, because I think there's a lot of power in that. If you're going to just describe the kind of spiritual or emotional benefit or foundation for that principle, what would you say?
I think there's, and I appreciate you made time for this because it is such an important one, and and I think there's two parts, right? First is, there's the saying in recovery, you can't keep what you don't give away, right? Got to give it away to keep it, and then the other one that's really also very important to me, and it's kind of a little bit of a leadership piece, is that to teach is to learn twice.
To teach is to learn twice, because you learn something, and then as you teach it, you learn it again.
You learn it again, and I think you continue to learn it at different levels. And so I think when you give to get, right, that the more you help others, the more it helps you. And I one time had a conversation with somebody where I said, one of the reasons I help is people because I think it's good karma, and then it comes back and helps me. And this person said, well, if you expect karma, it doesn't come to you. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. My life tells me that. But really, when it gets down to is what's my motivation, right? When my motives are right, my actions are right. And when my actions are right, my life is right.
Yeah.
So, and I end that principle with, there's a great ROI on giving to get. So, help others, give it away. And I think, and that's, I guess, kind of part of this book was I wanted to share what I had learned. And again, I'm getting it back 2, 3, 4-fold.
Yeah, because just the book itself, you probably embedded these things in your own life through going to the work of sharing them with somebody else.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing, the reason I think giving it away and really, giving to others is years ago when I was working at Bose, one of my coworkers who I still stay in touch with, Peter Theron, Pete one time, he said something to the effect of, well, I think that guy's reading his own press clippings. And it just stood out to me is, I am what I do. It's not who I think I am or what I say I am. And so I think when you're willing to share with others, sometimes you're given your beliefs, but it's a good inventory about, are your beliefs what you're really doing? And sometimes you need to self-correct.
So the guy who was believing his press clippings, the teaching there is, don't believe the sort of publicist version of yourself. Take a look at what's real about yourself.
Yeah, and I think part of the I think one of the things that we have to do with ourselves is kind of monitor: are we who we want to be, and are we who we say we are?
Right.
And just and I think that's just an important part. But it's you don't, and I think that's part of journaling. Right. I think journaling's a good thing to just, I can probably lie to myself more in just talking or thinking than I can in writing. Because when the truth comes back at you in print, like, oh, yeah.
It's staring right at you. Huh?
Yeah. I guess I was a little bit of not a nice person. And when I cut somebody off or I was short or what have you. So, I think you just have to be cautious. And I think that the thing that the book really talks about is, and this was a lot of people talk about improve 1% a day. It's kind of a big concept out there with James Clear and some others. And that struggled with me a little bit because I didn't know what 1% looked like, right? But the principle number 5 is improve 3 things a day.
Mm.
And so when I get better every day, I can get better. I can do 3 things better every day.
Yeah.
And so, if you do it every 3 a day, you actually get 1,095 improvements a year. And let me just share one last thing on that is, and I also have this practice. It pops up in my reminders. So I use my phone reminders a lot as a guide of how I want to be that day. And so I have a reminder that pops up every day that says, do 5 good things a day.
Mm-hmm. Now is
so,
that like an iPhone, the reminders app on your iPhone?
Yep.
And
it
so you could
6:15 every morning.
How do you do that? You create a reminder and there's a way to just set it on repeat for a certain time of the day?
Yeah, so it repeats daily.
And it's the same thing. It just says do 5 good things.
5 good things a day.
And then you've also got one at the end of the day. What does that say and when does that show up?
Well, let's see. Also, I have another one for kind of a belief system for to be successful that should pop up at 10 a.m. The evening one is I just know when I listen to that music and I turn the light off, I just do a quick review of the day.
Yeah.
And this is where that journaling comes in handy because I had planned what my day was. And I think the mistake most people make is they get too focused on to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I talk a lot about priorities. There's a difference between a priority and a to-do. Right?
What's the difference?
Well, I think so. My priority, right, is as right now I'm actually working on a new course that I'm going to sell. And it talks about dealing with what I call workday overload syndrome. Right. Most of us are overloaded. Right. So you could say my to-do is to focus on, creating this course. But my priorities are about how do I create a course that can help others. And so this priority is just, might be action items under it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, the word to-do just like, let's just check things off. And I also think it keeps us from doing the things that really matter. I have a thing called the 3X rule, right? That there's work we do with 1X, 2X, or 3X. 1X is really low-level work. Well, if I'm a manager or something, I can delegate that. Or in my home, right? We pay someone to clean the house. It's the best money I ever spent in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I used to fight with my first wife about housekeeping or whatever. We hired a cleaner and just did away with that.
Mm-hmm.
I understand not everybody can afford a housekeeper, someone to come in once a week. But what I found is I could spend that time in a different way that contributed to my life or my business. Yeah. And then there's 2X work, which I think is more essential work, but it's not making the biggest impact. And there's 3X work that has the highest priority and impact on my business and in my life. And the priority should always be something that is 3X on a daily basis.
Well, we've had some fun with Grok here, and you said you're using AI. What's an example of how you're using AI in your work each day?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, both, and I use it for brainstorming. And I'm a solopreneur, and so I use it to just bounce ideas and refine things, and it almost. It starts off with, a general idea and then let ChatGPT run with it. And then that will normally spur more things. And I think the one mistake people make is, as we saw with Grok, is it told you exactly to do something you told it not to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I think I think AI is a great partner in my day.
Yeah, I heard a term at this Amazon thing I went to in New York where they're talking about the update for Alexa, and the guy that he had some role on the Alexa team, and I said, what's the magical moment of your experience with this? And he said it was realizing that this new version of Alexa was capable of conversational intelligence. And I'd never heard that phrase before, but I really get it because like you, I use it for brainstorming, and I used to think of it as a chat, a thought partner, and then I've upgraded it to a thought buddy. But there's intelligence in the conversation. That you're not just like asking for an answer for something, you're getting smarter because of the back and forth with these agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing that I do that maybe some people might consider is I'll get something to a certain point and then I'll run it through a different AI.
Oh,
Instead of
that's
just staying within
interesting.
the same AI. I mean, right. And you could say I have a primary and a secondary. So, the primary will remember. So again, I've been working on this 3X, the 3X rule and 3X living and 3X leadership. So I'm really kind of focusing on this higher priority and impact. So it's about priority and impact. And so, the great thing is AI keeps learning it, right? So as I've worked on it for the last few months, it's refined it. But sometimes it can also get stuck a little bit in a loop. And so I'll take it to the other AI, run it through, and it has a little bit less learning, but it also gives me probably a fresher look. And I
Now,
had a breakthrough today where I did that.
are you detecting any difference in sort of personality that Claude would give you a certain kind of feedback in that kind of a conversation versus ChatGPT, or is it just picking a different one sort of to reshuffle the deck?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think it's just because it's sometimes if you start in your first AI and you keep drilling it down, it can almost sometimes get stuck on
I see.
something.
Yeah.
So I take it over to Claude, and I pay for the $25 for ChatGPT, 25 for Claude. I mean, if you think about $25 to have access to AI, it's just crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about the best probably investment there is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything that we didn't get to one way or the other that you'd like to make sure gets mentioned before we sign off?
Yeah, I just think, I guess the thing I would just leave people with is that, I think the real element of the day makes a year, makes a life is, again, it's not what we think about doing. It's not what we're saying we're going to do. It is what we do. And I think the big difference between people who are living kind of a life that they want versus maybe some who are struggling a little bit is the difference is in the actions that they take and the priorities that they have.
I have been speaking with Doug Fleener, author of The Day Makes the Year, Makes the Life, Transform Your Work and Life with One Day Success. Thanks very much, Doug.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciated the conversation.
That was a fun conversation that I had with Doug. In the book, he quotes Zig Ziglar, who I think I listened to some Zig Ziglar back in the day. He was a self-help motivational speaker of great success back in the 70s. His big book in 1975 was See You at the Top. And he had a quote which Doug included in his book, and it says, "You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want." And I think Doug has been acting on that sentiment in his book. Another person I used to listen to was Wayne Dyer. He had some very motivational tapes, and there are some others over the years. I have enjoyed hearing and thinking about what people have to say in this area. It's been called self-help, but I think sometimes a pejorative aspect to that. I don't think that's so much anymore. I think people who are writing about how to live life better, that's maybe coming more into the mainstream than that would have been 50 years ago. And now I'm getting a similar kind of uplift from reading people from a contemplative background. And as it happens, today, March 3rd, is the 81st birthday of Richard Rohr, who has written some books that have meant a lot to me. The one that he published back in about 5 years ago, The Universal Christ. And as it happens, he when he released that book, he mentioned that it was going to be his last book. He's been in poor health for quite a while now, and but he had a chance to take a copy of that book, The Universal Christ, to visit Pope Francis, and he was going to give it to him, and the Pope said, "I've already read it," and then he gave Richard some encouraging words. So he's on my thoughts today. And in fact, he has a new book which is going to be published tomorrow. The title is The Tears of Things, Prophetic Wisdom for an Age of Outrage. And at midnight tonight, the Kindle version of that book will load to my Kindle. I was able to get an advance review copy, which I'm just about finished with, about 80%. And it's based on the prophets from the Bible and what they have to say about a period when everything seems to be falling apart, and great divisions in the society sound familiar. It certainly did to me, and some of the things that I've been reading in this book have been helpful to me in thinking how to navigate the current times from the point of kind of prophetic wisdom from hundreds of years ago, the prophets. This coming Friday, I'll be leaving for South by Southwest in Austin, and I'll be there for just about a week, and I've got a hotel room right near the convention center. I'll be looking for AI sessions, of course. There'll be all kinds of buzz about AI and agents and things like that. But I think I might be looking out for some other, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some people experimenting with AI in contemplation, or AI in Buddhism, or, some of these different interests of mine feel pretty eclectic, but you get 30,000 people together, and, the chances of finding a few other people that are interested in the same Venn diagram of things to yourself is larger than zero. But I'll have all my gear with me. I'll put up at least one episode of the podcast from there, and I'll be posting to the Substack Len's newsletter at lenedgerly.substack.com, and to the Morning Journal. And I think I'll probably be putting up some videos at YouTube. I've got a press pass again. I'm always very gratified when South by Southwest continues to give me press credentials, which I've had for 10, maybe 15 years now. And so I feel like I have a responsibility to share what I learn, and I'll make an attempt to do so when I'm in Austin starting on Friday. So that's it. Thanks for listening.